All right, you're just in time for the Monday Town Hall session discussion. We're talking about elections and why they're a matter of life and death in this country. What is the problem? What are the solutions? We'd like to hear from you as well. The hashtag is Monday Report. Twitter Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. You can also text 22422 and give us your solutions and your views as to why they're such a divisive issue that they end up being a matter of life and death. I already see a lot of your feedback coming through. We'll read some of them during this broadcast, but let me start by introducing my guests in studio tonight, beginning from my immediate right. Honorable Ruto, former Bomet Governor. Thank you for making time. We have Madam Lilian Mahiri Zaja, former IBC Vice Chair. Asante for making time. Honorable Kivutha Kibwana, Makueni Governor. Asante for making time. And Wanjiru Gikonyo, National Coordinator TISA, which is the Institute of Social Accountability. Thank you for making time. And thank you to all the people who are here with me to talk about this issue. They form the majority because they're mostly youth, and they're the ones who form the majority. They'll speak to us as to why they think elections is such a divisive issue. And that is exactly where we start, Governor. Why do you think it is such a matter of life and death in this country?
I think the elections in Kenya have tended to become a matter of life and death because there's a misconception, especially amongst the older population, that once their own is in there, that is a gateway to getting resources. And we have worsened it by reintroducing the super presidency, that is the pure presidential system where the winner takes it all. And therefore, it has tended to exclude large parts of the population. They don't feel it. We had thought we were sorting out that through devolution, but when devolved units were denied resources, then we are back to the central government again, trying to beg with all our hats out and down. So really, there has been that tendency. And the worst part of it is that it's difficult to understand, yet Kenyans work very well together in between elections. But come elections, everybody recedes to some strange world of tribalism.
Yeah. You say devolved units have been deprived of funds. You've been there before. The government says they've been disbursing almost 35% and even more. Are you saying that's not true? It's
not 35%. It has never even gone beyond 15%. They keep telling Kenyans that they are disbursing 35%, and they don't tell them that it is 35% of resources of 5 years ago. They use what they call the last audited accounts as approved by Parliament. And Parliament always approves that audit report of 5 years ago. They don't approve last year's. So in fact, we expect, if we are going to discuss continual review, we need to say we devolve even that 35% of the preceding year's ordinary revenues. Yeah. That's what we should be talking about. Okay. They deny counties resources and they borrow too much. And then by the time you are sharing out revenue, they say the first charge on the revenue is debts. So all debts are paid plus pensions, and then you remain with very little. Then they say 35% of that very little. Okay. And yet actually it ends up being 12-14%.
So it's never got into the 35%?
It has never even gone to 20.
Okay.
Yes.
Madam Zaja, why do you think it's such a divisive issue? You've been at the IEBC for a while. Does this surprise you? For example, the elections in 2002 was peaceful. 2007 was a completely different story. Yeah.
I think it's rather unfortunate as a country that we keep finding ourselves in that issue. Every election, we have put a very high premium, and particularly on the presidential election. Yeah. Not just the election, but presidential. So we have put a premium on it. Every election, it gets higher and higher. You know, we've just had an election in 2017, and now we are already on our feet running for the 2022, you know, and that's how much we have come as a country, that we want everything to happen around the presidency. And how do we make that happen? You know, the politicians, they rally their people along tribal lines. So you find that the more people you rally, the more assured you are of getting that prize. Yeah. It is quite pricely, and the price we have been paying for it really It's the bloodshed during elections, the loss of lives, the loss of property, and it doesn't seem as if we are getting anywhere to resolving it. But I think after 2007, what Kriegler said, really, 2007 might just look like a Christmas party if we don't address these issues in earnest.
But who is to blame for this? Is it the leaders or the people?
It is all of us. Everybody is responsible. It is all of us. The leaders, the people, because the people are mobilized along tribal lines.
Okay.
Why would you want to vote for a man of your tribe? Because you know when he gets to that high seat, you'll be assured of a job, you'll be assured of something. Then when election comes and goes and you don't see anything, you get angry again. But still, when the election comes back, 5 years, again, we are in the same game of musical chairs.
So we are locked in some vicious
We are locked
circle.
inside there.
Okay. Honorable Kibwana, what do you think is the problem? Because you have an initiative called the Kenya We Want. What did you find out and how do you think we can fix it?
I remember there is somebody in Zimbabwe, a voter, who said in Africa elections are war. And come election time, many people in that country, even our country, they begin to go to the rural areas and they try to register there because they think that there will be a problem.
Yeah.
But when you don't have a clear winner in an election, because people are mobilizing, as my colleagues have said, on ethnic basis, everybody says they're a winner. And even before the elections, they're already telling their followers, we have already won. And if we don't win, then the elections will be rigged. So we have not begun to accept the democratic verdict of an election. So nobody loses. And when you lose, it means somebody else has rigged you out. And of course, because you spend a lot of money in the campaigns, you want to win so that you can recoup your money. And so if you don't win, you must say that something wrong has happened. So I think unless we change our systems so that people can accept democracy, they can accept that you lose, and when you lose honorably, we will continue to be in the same situation.
When you say change system, what do you mean?
By changing system, I mean
the system of governance.
First of all, we make it difficult for people to simply win on ethnic basis.
So we change systems so that doesn't work for you.
Sorry?
You don't think the 50+1 vote is good enough?
50+1. Even in the mature democracies now, you're having problems. You're having problems in Israel. You're having problems in Britain. You're having problems all over the place because in most of these elections, there are no decisive winners. So it's a hung election, so to speak. Again, if you don't change the system so that people don't buy the election, because actually what is happening now is those who have a lot of money have an advantage. But if you have good ideas or you're a young person and you don't have the money, you won't get far.
Okay. Wanjiru, what do you think? What do you think are the issues? We've had this conversation with you before, and you can hear some of them coming up here, changing the misconception that the winner takes it all and our man up there will necessarily solve our issues. What do you think are the main issues here?
Yes, I do agree that re-centralizing power back into this all-powerful presidency is a problem, and the Constitution sought to disperse power away from the presidency. And I think if you look at 2017, one of the reasons the country didn't flare up, people didn't fight, is because much as many Kenyans were very disappointed with the result, and you can actually look at 2013 as maybe a better example because this other one had a lot of other things. In 2013, Kenyans were disappointed with the result because there were questions about the credibility that was then determined by the Supreme Court. And, you know, half the country then said, okay, the Supreme Court has spoken, we've accepted. People didn't fight. Why didn't they fight? It's because, one, power was disbursed, so there was an expectation that, okay, we didn't get the presidency and we are not happy with what happened, the governance there, but at least we now can go back to our county. So devolution is a very key aspect in terms of dealing with this high expectation around elections, and I agree very much with the governor that it's the fact that the administration, Jubilee administration, is killing devolution actually is fanning this electoral violence even more. But there's another aspect that's coming out, and I believe Professor Kivuda, Governor, also alluded to that, this issue of accountability. About the conduct of political leaders, the conduct of our elections. And this goes back to when the election, what did the Constitution anticipate? The Constitution anticipated strong political parties, accountable political parties, a strong IEBC, accountable leaders, Chapter 6, leadership and integrity. Now, these key laws were diluted. At the point of enactment, under the coalition government, actually, this is an inherited problem. Under the coalition government, key provisions were diluted. Diluted by the cabinet, diluted further by parliament, because politicians knew if we pass a strong elections law, strong political parties act, we will then not make it in the forthcoming election. So selfish interest came in. So I would say one of the problems we have I think we do need to look at the system. But either way, we need accountability so that political leaders know that an election is really a referendum on their performance, and voters will decide based on your conduct how you performed in between of the elections. Right now, it's really a free ride. The accountability of elections is weak. Accountability even outside of elections. I can't recall, it's so difficult to recall my member of parliament, so difficult to recall my MCA if I'm not happy with their performance. So there is too much power re-centralizing, and there is too little accountability around political parties.
How much of this ends at the doorsteps of IEBC, Governor? Instead, when you talk about institutional accountability.
IEBC is just becomes a pawn in a fight, because IEBC, no matter what ideas they have, the powers that be often actually rubbish what they intend to do, and they can interfere. We've seen how horrible it can become even for the IEBC commissioners. We put them there, they have got very great ideas, they want to do the right thing, but we interfere with them to the extent that there is little they can actually do. Because elections are interfered with even in the villages by provincial administration, by the police, by government officers, by the funding situation, and IEBC has no real structure of controlling what is happening in Turkana. They don't even know where that place is. So it is an impossible thing we are giving to IEBC. We first have to sort out the problem at the political class level. And remember that Kenya actually nearly went to more chaos in the 90s, because we were saying the presidency is the mother of all the problems. First of all, it is the home of corruption. It is the office that is given all the instruments of power, that is the resources, and then they are actually in charge of the patronage resources. And then instead of diluting the presidency, we actually strengthened it when we passed the constitution. Bomas had given us a much better structure of governance, but we diluted it in Naivasha and the parliament. And like Wanjiru has said, we went ahead to make sure that all the laws that were passed looked like they were devolution laws, but actually we put in clauses that actually negated the whole exercise. Remember even that one of recalling MPs. We said, yes, you can recall MPs. The constitution talked about it, but parliament shall pass the legislation. And then the MPs said, first of all, you don't discuss about recalling your MP until after 2 years. And then if you want to recall the MP, then you must take him to court. And then the courts must agree. And then in real terms, you'll never recall anybody. Yet the constitution was talking about recall. So all the laws, including the land laws, were actually reversed. Even in this current parliament, they have even done, they have even worsened even more legislation, like the land laws. They have re-centralized back to Nairobi. Yet, initially, all that was supposed to have been devolved.
Okay.
And there was slightly better laws even during the, a few better laws even in the coalition government. But they have been worsened since.
Okay.
So the real situation is that we've got to address the character of the presidency and this inclusivity of as many communities as possible within government.
Okay.
And then we must devolve as much as possible.
How do you suggest we do that inclusivity? Because the people thought devolution would help. Are you saying we widen the executive?
Devolution should be strengthened, first of all. Get the resources, up to 40%, like the rest of the world is doing. If you go to Nigeria, you go to South Africa, they're talking about 48, 52%. But here in Kenya, we're talking about 15%. And then we even worsen that by overborrowing, so that we have got little to distribute. Okay. But the real situation here is the constitution had allocated national government few functions. Like, for example, in healthcare, 70% is devolved. About 30-25% is national.
Yeah.
But they will retain 70% of the resources, yet the functions have actually gone down. And they give the 70% that has been devolved, the functions, they give them 30% of the resources, or even less.
Okay.
And yet they expect devolution to function.
Okay.
So what we are simply, what I'm of the opinion of is that the national government should stick to its work, which is policy and a bit of implementation on the major issues like highways and the rest of the super infrastructure and research. But the rest of the works which are devolved should be funded at the local level, so that there is more employment for the youth. But as of now,
at the county level.
At the county level. But we must also reduce the powers of the presidency. We must have a government that is accountable on the floor of parliament, so that they can be questioned. Then you can reduce corruption.
Okay. Let me open the floor to my audience. How many of you have questions and concerns? I see there's a microphone there. Start with your name and then give us your concern.
My name is Chris Maliongovi. I'm a rights defender. I've just heard the former governor talk about the question of the winner-take-it-all being the most contentious issue here. My concern actually has not been about the winner-take-it-all, the loser take it all. In fact, that is what has been creating problems for us. For 24 years, there was no credible elections in this country. There were, in fact, other 15 years before that. Then the 24 years, no credible elections. Then we had problems in 2007. Now, I believe that the problem here is not about the issue of winner take it all. It is the loser take it all.
What do you mean loser take it all?
Someone doesn't win an election because actually Kenyans have Kenyans vote with their conscience.
Yeah.
Kenyans don't leave their heads at home to come and vote. They come with their brains, they come and cast their vote, and they know who someone else voted for. It's not a secret, it's not rocket science. Kenyans know whom they voted for.
So you feel your vote doesn't count?
It doesn't count. So we waste taxpayers' money, we register voters, we set aside days, people don't go to work, stay at home, go vote, and then all of a sudden, you get a person you didn't vote for. At the end of the day, we get disgruntled.
Okay.
And we have to sort it out. If you can't sort it out diplomatically, people have to sort it out using other means.
Okay.
So that is how this whole problem comes about.
Zaja, how credible is the process? Because this concern of people's votes not counting has come up several times. How credible is the process now that in hindsight, you've been at the IEBC as the vice chair?
I must say it's as credible as what we have put in our constitution. You see, when we got all these electoral violence and Kriegler came in, he made proposals that brought in new blood into the electoral system. We embraced international principles, one man, one vote, that your vote should count, the youth's vote should count.
But does it?
And the marginalized people, their votes should count. So we also looked at the electoral process. Other than the system, Kriegler looked at the process, everything about the process. So we should interrogate, where do we go wrong? Because if your vote, you come out to vote on that one day, and remember, we have all the 6 elections on one day, why then shouldn't it count? Why would you feel disgruntled? Why would you, as a youth, not vote for the person you want? Why should you be swayed by the power of money in elections. These are some of the things we should be asking ourselves. Because for IEBC, it will conduct elections in accordance with the Constitution, in accordance with the law. But all within the process of all these malpractices that happen. Yeah. And what do you get? An end result that takes us down that road.
So these malpractices happen at the polling station?
Along the line.
And it's not at the final part. It's not at the institutional level. I see when Zero wants to jump in. And what you put in is what you get. The result, what you put in is what you'll get. That result that you're going to fight over, that this is not what I wanted. And you will fight and again leave to fight another day when the next cycle comes. So if you know this process, there's something wrong with it, then how come you just declare the results at the end of it? Why don't you just say,
there is a process where IEBC has no control. Yeah. Remember, we start with voter registration. Then we go to delimitation of boundaries. Then we go to so many other things, nomination of candidates, where we have no control, we only follow the law. Because we expect parties to follow what is prescribed in the Constitution. Okay. Remember Article 91. If you read Article 91 of the Constitution, it is clear the character of a political party. It should have a national character. Yeah. But is that what we have in the parties? We don't have that. And the mess that happens in the party primaries, then it has to come to IEBC for adjudication. And after that, goes to the court. But what happens there? Do you get the people you want? You should complain even at the political party primaries. And nobody complains. Because again, we see the power of money. And these are not faults you can point fingers at the IEBC, really. Wanjiru doesn't seem to agree with this.
Yeah, because the thing is, and it's really unfortunate, we are on the eve of the release of this BBI report that proposes to, have more constitutional amendments, a referendum possibly. And what we are saying is that the anticipation of the Constitution has not been met. And this is because laws and systems were set up in a way that undermined the spirit and sometimes even the letter of the Constitution. Yeah. So there's a report by AFRICOG, there's a report by ELOG, there's a report by Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. I think one is a 2015 report, there's a 2017 report, there's a 2019 report. Yeah. They say the same thing. They say there are problems with the way IEBC is set up, the way the commissioners are appointed. One, that's a problem. They should be independent, not linked to the political parties. Yeah. Then there's been a perennial problem with the voters' register. And this issue came up even just 2-3 weeks ago. Yeah. So, this needs to be sorted out. There's an issue with the procurement processes. Right, and this plays out in full media, and the questions are asked, and people are then prosecuted overseas who are giving bribes to officers who are then not prosecuted on this side. It's amazing how corruption happens one way, but there's a problem with that. There's lack of accountability in terms of access to information. There's, all through the process, there are failures that have taken place in not just this election, but dating back to 2013, people who've been monitoring at the point where things were supposed to have changed under the new dispensation. So recommendations have been made. Yeah. Some of these are weaknesses in the legislation. And what was expected, especially after 2017, because 2017, the country went into a very dark place. And, I fear to think what will happen if we have a repeat. That's in 2007. Yes. I'm saying 2017, because 2017, we got in, business stopped. Fine, we might say that most of the killings were at the hands of the police, but when a country gets into that kind of stalemate, you have to say, what is wrong with this election system? Okay. And the tragedy is we are now here saying, oh, let's reform the Constitution without asking what is wrong with the election system. And part of this has to do with the political leadership. The political leadership that interprets the laws, that whips MPs in Parliament to pass legislation in a certain way, where you have an IEBC that's set up to fail. You have officers, even in the IEBC, who have, compromised conduct and nothing seems to happen. Allegations back and forth. How do you have allegations between the commissioners, the kind of issues that were coming out, and there was no prosecutions and nothing happened? Are you serious? What other result can we expect other than chaos? Actually, if we don't have chaos, that will be what will be a surprise. So the main problem we have is around our elections, around our political party, around our electoral system. It's not a constitutional problem. It's a problem of political accountability, because we have leaders who must stay in power or get into power or ensure they control who is in power so that their interests can be protected. So we have a state capture that is then utilizing the electoral system to perpetrate this state capture. That is the problem, and I don't really have a solution on how we, we deal with it. But in the end, we are looking at a citizen revolution. We are looking at a revolution because young people who are disenfranchised, who are suffering economically, and the sectors that have been hit, it's so ironic, are the sectors that really voted in this administration. You're talking about agriculture, you're talking about dairy farming, and you've seen what has happened around dairy farming. You're talking about informal traders. You've seen this, they have no space. What has happened around informal trade. You're talking about even these taxi drivers. So you're seeing that the interests of the state or political elite in the state have injured youth and people who are working in the informal sector, who are a majority. So when they are being told, oh, 2010 did not give us the promise, now let us give you another promise, keep waiting, your time will come, and you can see there are people benefiting, that entrepreneurs are continuing to get rich. This is a recipe for revolution because systems don't work. Like that gentleman said, when the Supreme Court spoke in 2017, the system worked. So the Supreme Court came and annulled an election, and people felt, yes, that election needed to be annulled. Then the Supreme Court said, this other election, you might not be happy, tulia, watu wakatulia. But I don't think it will keep happening like that, because people have lost confidence in the process, in the system, and in the institutions. So when you lose confidence in the institutions, you take power to yourself. That's what the recipe for a revolution.
Let me see how many people have comments and questions here. I see quite a number. All right, I'll come. You have a microphone already. Yes, go ahead.
So my question, I'm John Odhiambo. My question is to former IEBC chairman. So my first question is this. So you mean political class do compromise the election, but because we don't have inadequacy of the law, but you don't prosecute them, you just leave them to go. And then again, you always aware that this election is fraud, is bad, but you still announce it to us. And then you are expecting the people, common mwananchi, to accept something that you yourself, you know, this thing is bad, but you are giving to them. And you are expecting us just to calm down and accept the result.
I don't think that's what I said. I think you may have misunderstood me, because I said, you know, you need to recall where we are coming from. When we had the Kriegler inquiry commission, the commission had terms of reference to look at both the laws, to look at the process, and the system. And this is why when we had the new constitution, we changed our electoral system. And then we looked deeply into the processes. What were these major flaws within the processes that we needed to change? This is where I was saying there are some issues, some processes which are beyond IEBC's control. IEBC will do everything in accordance with the law, in accordance with the principles that are set in the Constitution. But I think you know very obvious examples. I've given the example of party primaries. When parties conduct their primaries, what powers does IEBC have other than to see that they have conformed to their own political manifestos, their party manifestos? And when they do not conform, they come to IEBC for adjudication. After that, if they are dissatisfied, they go to the courts. Now, these are where the problems arise, because we cannot impose candidates for the parties. We can only adjudicate and ensure that they conform to the constitutional principles and the law. So what I'm saying, and I think Wanjiru has alluded to, is that the institutions have been weakened. That is for a fact. And at the time when we were reforming the IEBC, we had sunk low, and not just the IEBC. There was the police, which came into question during that time. There was also the judiciary and the office of the AG. All the state agencies and institutions had gone so weak that people no longer had confidence with them. We are trying to rebuild confidence in these institutions. We are trying to rebuild the institutions to conform to the principles that we have laid out in the Constitution. And that is not a task for one institution. You cannot pick out IEBC and say they are going to be the ones to conform, and yet the political parties are not conforming. It is a responsibility of everyone.
Yes.
You know, I think there is a fundamental problem. Because most of us as Kenyans think we have the right to vote. But during election time, we are told how to vote. Like when you come from a certain region, you are told that this is how we are voting, and you vote that way. Therefore, you are not exercising the right that you have yourself personally to choose. And in many ways, our elections translate into ethnic census. Meaning, if from my region, all of us vote for a particular candidate, and then that candidate doesn't win, particularly people in the rural areas who have not had civic education, then they ask how? Because we all voted for our person. How come they didn't win? So it means that these elections were rigged. We know for a fact that for a long time now, the IEBC does not have full membership. And yet it's continuing to educate our elections. A while back, we were saying that it needed to be reformed. And so there's that basic problem, but now if there's going to be a referendum, the same half IEBC is going to administer that particular referendum. So even as was said earlier, the Constitution is so clear that you cannot make political parties on ethnic basis. Actually, such a party shouldn't be registered. And yet, the majority of the parties attract following from their regions. So I think there is fundamental change that is required so that political parties, elections can be institutions of democracy.
So even if we were to give more positions now, would that help? Say there's a call for maybe the premier position. Would that be a solution to this issue?
I think that would be simplistic. I don't think it's about a specific office. It's about the system. If we say we go parliamentary, it means there will be more accountability on the floor of the parliament. That actually executive authority is exercised by a prime minister. And that prime minister, for example, if there is a waste of resources like it happened in those dams, the prime minister should be sacked and his entire cabinet. But if you've elected a president, no one touches him. And once the presidency holds all the power, parliament becomes useless. Like, look at how they are being bamboozled into reversing the gains. Take, for example, with the police. We thought the police were going in the right direction and that there were reforms coming up. But all of a sudden, there was an about turn. And the end result, the police are even worse than they were before. Look at the way they beat up that young girl of Kenyatta University. The same way they were beating Reverend Timothy Njoya outside the parliament. They were just beating that person to kill. There was no real other option. So what is it? And Kenyans are quiet. No one is telling us anything about what has happened. They will say there will be prosecution, there will be arrests. But it is symptomatic of a much more serious problem. The police are currently a law unto themselves. They are the only ones with the power, with the instruments of terror, legislated or allowed instruments of terror. And they are terrorizing everybody, everywhere. And yet, no action. The parliament is being told to pass laws. They are passing it. The only institution that was now surviving, the judiciary, is now under siege. The judiciary could be crushed any time. Once you crush the judiciary, so what remains of this country? Actually, like Wanjiru is saying, what next? We've crushed parliament because we have made them sing specifically what the powers that be want them to sing. Wanaimba. They no longer debate anything in parliament. I also don't know whether I'm still seeing a parliament that's supposed to work. Or what is it that has happened? Okay. It's not the same thing we saw. Okay. Yeah, it's a big choir. Okay. The choir has become even bigger. And now they are divided into teams to go around the country to tell us a constitution should even have a price of cabbages inside there. So, and they will tell you in broad daylight. And they will not say, you don't know. And yet Kenyans, I don't know, they are quiet. So what are we talking about? We are simply saying, let us rearrange first of all. I think it is the power that corrupts. There's an old adage that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So what do you expect when you concentrate power in one office? Okay. He goes to the moon. I remember even the time when ministers were members of parliament, because they were being questioned on the floor of the house, they did not want to be ashamed in the eyes of their constituents. Yeah. So they would even try to make things slightly better, and they would even probably take some views to the president that are slightly more amenable to the people. But when you appoint ministers who have no idea who their neighbors are, even at home, they left their own rural homes long time ago, and they are lost somewhere in Nairobi or in the World Bank. So what happens?
All right. And on that note, we have to take a quick break here on the Monday Report Town Hall. When we come back, now we're talking about solutions. How do we fix the system? And I'll start with the youth, then to the voters, and then we'll come to the panelists. But keep your views coming as well. Hashtag Monday Report 22422 is the SMS line. At Trevor Mbijat, Citizen TV Kenya. We're back in just a bit.